All right. So, because I'm reading out of a book, I'll put my glasses on here. We're looking at The Imitation of Christ by Thomas A Kempis, and we've been talking about how to prepare for and what attitude to have and what to do during this Christian ritual called communion or the Lord's Supper or the Last Supper, or I've heard it called numerous things. And for those who don't know, it's an occasional, if not daily, practice of being served wine and consecrated wine and bread, an unleavened bread, by the priest in commemoration of the sacrifice of the beloved of the Christ. And uh, it's done in the tradition I grew up in. We did it every Sunday, but I've heard of some traditions doing it every day. And I've heard some traditions that only do it on high days, like big holidays. And it's a beautiful ritual. It's an odd ritual when you think about what's really being done, but it's a beautiful ritual in its purpose, in just reacquainting us with the love of God, really, with the mercy of God, and the forgiveness and letting go of our karmas. That it's the beloved telling us that really our part is to love and to remember the name and to appreciate that divine nature that's within us, and that God is the doer. God will do the rest. And so, it's a celebration of that, really. And so, since many of us aren't Christian, some are, I know of, and some of us are definitely very, very sympathetic toward Christianity, very loving toward Christianity. But in the Vedanta tradition, really, I would say that we don't have an equivalent uh, ritual like that. Pujas are somewhat like that. It's a communion to God, but it's more of a worship where you're offering, things and yourself to God. But to me, since they call it communion, and really that's what the celebration is in Christianity, I think the equivalent for that, at least in my own life, is my own practice. That my sitting down for my practice during the mornings and afternoons, and whenever it happens, is a practice of surrender and an enjoyment of the presence of the divine, however you want to think of that, whether if it's your own divine nature that you're enjoying or whether God. It can be viewed in different ways. The names and words, obviously, within the tradition, don't matter. It's whatever your disposition is, whatever is easiest or most attractive to you, because that's God's purpose. God's purpose is to reach you, and that appears to us as our highest form of love, whatever that might be. And so, as we read these things on communion, then you can sort of translate it that way. It's very useful in that. I've read through the pages with that idea and have seen that it works quite lovely in a very beautiful way. So, we're on chapter 13 in book 4. And book 4, the whole is on the Blessed Sacrament, or this ritual of the wine and body of Christ. On chapter 13, this is called Longing for Union with Christ. And the heading is, A Devout Soul Should Long with the Whole Heart to be United to Christ in the Blessed Sacrament. And this is fascinating to me in the sense that, certainly in Ramakrishna's teachings, he's always talking about how important this longing for God is, this longing for truth, this longing for knowledge. We'll say divine knowledge, but to have that interior focus, because in order to keep the mind one pointed, really, that longing has to be supreme. You really have to have the will to be that focused in order to have that vision of God. And I find that a lot of the problems in my practice, or yeah, they're not big. We'll call them problems. Why not? Problems in my practice is that when the mind is sitting on an idea, some more subtle notion or some subtle thing that I'm investigating during during my sitting, I find that on those subtler things, it takes just a very slight disturbance in the mind to pull you completely out of your focus, completely out of what you might have been experiencing or investigating. And it's very difficult to get back to that point again because of the subtlety that you reach in your practice after you've been doing it for a little while. So a devout soul should long with the whole heart. So the heart doesn't go to anyone else or anything else, to Christ in the Blessed Sacrament, right? And it's interesting in a new book by Richard Rohr. He's a Catholic monk. He's renewing this idea of a daily practice for Christians around contemplative prayer, which is exactly what we would call meditation, and even mantra meditation. But the mantra that they use is from a book called the Cloud of Unknowing, where actually in that book it says you can use any word or short phrase as a repetitive mantra for approaching God. But the one that they have, I think it's Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, right? That's the little phrase that they repeat in there. But again, the book itself teaches that any phrase can be used. You can say love over and over, as long as it's a divine quality according to their teaching. So this starts off with the disciple saying, "If only I could find you alone, O Lord, and tell you all that is in my heart." Right? And this is why we call it communion. Because actually in meditation, I was just, I actually have to write this down for somebody, I just remembered. But I was talking with someone the other day that in meditation, really, that's what we're doing. We are sitting there and there's no need for conversation. I mean, of course, at first, when we pray, we talk and communicate, and we feel like we have to tell God all of our troubles and ask for help and all these things. And in the beginning, that's sort of the feeling, and it's the best way to practice in the beginning. But after a while, you become like an old married couple. What are you going to say to God that God doesn't know, right? What are you going to spend all that time trying to come out with ways of explaining how you feel in your inner life and what's going on? And at some point, meditation ceases to be an action that happens at that level, and it's an action that begins to happen at a much deeper level, where your communion is you not describing anything to God because you've become aware that God is your awareness, which means that God knows your condition before you did, right? That God was experiencing your condition before you had thoughts about it or before you had words about it. And so communion then, or meditation, becomes a deep opening inside, so that rather than put things into sentences and rather than feeling like you need to say things to God because he can't see inside, you lay that aside and you just surrender in a such, and turn your entire self into a listening device, turn your entire self into an ear, and just sit before the beloved like a spiritual suntan. That as you sit in the light of that divine love, in the light of that divine awareness, that you are changed, right? And we know from the Divine Mother that she says that's the point. She says, and you are not the doer. So in your practice, you're not the one cleaning yourself up. She's doing that. And so we sit with that kind of attitude and we open up everything so she can get into all the nooks and crannies with her cleaning utensils. So I wish I could find you alone, O Lord, and tell you all that is in my heart. Then I could enjoy you as much as my soul desires. I was going somewhere with all of that. Richard Rohr, Catholic monk, wrote a book called The Universal Christ, it was a great book. And in that book, he posits that Christ and Jesus are different, that the Christ is the office and Jesus was the inhabitant of that office. Now, he doesn't come out and say this. He hints, I know that he's a student of Vedanta, because in his introduction, it mentions what they call the perennial philosophy. And that's a phrase that Aldous Huxley used to use to refer to the Sanatana Dharma. So it's kind of a neutral, non-religious term, the perennial philosophy, that was used by the earlier teachers to disarm talking about the Sanatana Dharma, right? Coming up with a phrase that nobody owns, that nobody would say, oh, that belongs to the Hindus, or that belongs to the Christians, or whatnot. Anyway, he writes this book, The Universal Christ, and he posits that the Christ is this station that has been inhabited by others. He doesn't say it, but as I understood it from reading it, those others would include like a Buddha, a Rama, a Krishna, a Chaitanya, that they have all inhabited that office. And of course, that's the idea in the Vedanta anyway, is that God keeps coming back, and it's the same being coming each time, but with a different play based on the needs and the emphasis that's necessary for that time. And so that means our view of religion is an ever deepening and widening river, that each time God appears, the river gets a little deeper and a little bit wider, right? But that it's a singularity. There's not multiple religions within that river. There's, many currents and whatnot, but the river itself just goes on as a singularity, getting deeper and wider every time the beloved decides to visit. And he says many times, oh, and I'm coming back, by the way. So this isn't this isn't a new teaching. All the incarnations say in some way or another, I'm coming back. Even Ramakrishna said that he would be back again. So then I could enjoy you as much as my soul desires. Then no one would disregard me, nor anything created concern or bother me. Then you only would speak to me, and I to you, as a lover does to a beloved, or a friend to a good friend. This is a wonderful ideal that's being presented here. That to enjoy the beloved as much as the soul desires. You can do that. Actually, there's nothing preventing you from doing that. And it's available to you this very moment. If you want to sit down, be quiet, and enjoy the divine to your heart's content, right? Then no one would disregard me, or anything created concern or bother me. I don't know about the disregard. I'm not sure what that's about. But certainly what happens in our practice, as we deepen our practice, this body, which is the temple of this divinity in the world, we get the atmosphere of a temple within us, within our own self. So that atmosphere that we go to temples to enjoy, that stillness, that sacredness, we develop that same atmosphere within ourselves, and we carry that with us. And then the world is always on the other side of that influence, right? And so we're not easily affected. It takes us longer to get angry. It takes us longer to, to answer the question what we want. Right? So anyway, that's by the side point. And so we develop this deep atmosphere of the presence within. And so we've got that company going on. And as we grow in that inner relationship, we begin to see God everywhere. We understand that we are in the dream of the beloved, that we live in a mind and not a material world. And that one of the corollaries of that is that everybody in this dream is in the same situation. They are all actors in the dream, but when the dream ends, they're the dreamer, they're God, they're the one who was having the dream. And so that's our condition. When we wake up, when we come to realization, we come to realize that we were just a character in the dream, and that our real nature was God, who was dreaming this whole dream. And so we would begin to see God in everyone, right? Which puts us in that relationship with God, not as me and, like at the beginning, some imaginary creation of my own in the heavens somewhere, watching me, peering at me, but it becomes a dynamic interaction with God alone as you live your day. That you know that every interaction you have is divine, And it's happening with God in reality, even though it looks like your overweight boss. It's not. It's the divine beloved looking at you through those eyes. And so when you talk to people, whether it's the cashier or the custodian or the president, for a spiritual soul, you see God in those eyes first and foremost. And that comes naturally as we go. At first, it's a practice. At first, we're like, okay, let me see. There you are, right? And we try and work ourselves into that habit. But in time, especially because if you start doing this, if you start doing this, it's the most wonderful thing. I remember the first time that I did it was at a cashier at the grocery store in Hollywood. And, I just was sitting there thinking as I was in line putting my groceries on the conveyor belt, I was thinking, God, okay, this is God. I'm here in the presence of God. And so when I got up and it was my turn, they always say those few little friendly things like, "Oh, hi, how are you doing?" And I looked at her in her eyes and I imagined seeing Thakur there looking out at me. And I just said, "Oh, I'm doing very well. How are you?" And I could hear, even in my own voice, the change that it made when I wasn't just throwing out a thing to some random stranger across the counter, that there was a tenor, there was there was a feeling, a presence of in my voice as I gave that to her. And I saw it hit its target because I saw her then relax a bit, not consciously, not in some big marked way, but I saw the little change in the energy, that she also felt more free and the conversation went somewhere. Actually, it wasn't just an exchange of niceties, and that was the first time that I had consciously practiced that, and I saw how different life could be. That wow, people respond when you talk to their soul instead of talking to their face. Right? They feel it. And I like to share with everybody always, again and again and again, that was the greatest gift that Moksha Prana, my first guru, gave to me, was that was the first time in my life that somebody had looked at my soul rather than at me. And I know that sounds, well, however it sounds, but it's true. It's a very different feeling when somebody doesn't stop at your face when they're talking to you, when they're actually looking through that. They're not stopping at the personality either. They're looking even through that. And you become aware that there's a deeper you when a holy person looks at you in that way. You receive it because you can just tell by the flavor of the glance that they weren't looking at the face or the personality. Right? So then I could enjoy you as much as my soul desires. That's exactly what we're talking about, right? That life becomes this encounter, becomes this interaction. And no one disregards you, right? Or disrespects you, nor anything created concern or bother me, right? Because you're aware of the unreality of the dream and the untouchability of the soul from the dream. And then you only would speak to me, right? That's what the realization is. This conversation, your life is a constant conversation with God. And how does God answer you? Through your karma, right? You do good things manifest. You treat people nicely, people treat you nicely. You're respectful, and the vast majority of the time people are respectful back. And so life is a constant communion with the beloved, and you can always know how you are by facing that. If the moment is content for you, if the moment brings you joy, if the moment is enough, you don't need to embellish it or be distracted from it, then things are going well between you and yourself. Then you only would speak to me and I to you, as a lover does to a beloved, or a friend to a good friend. And that becomes your relationship with the world around you, a friend to a good friend, right? A sense of, as Brother Lawrence used to say in his book, that I would develop a general fond regard for everything, right? For God in everything. This is my one desire and what I pray for, to be entirely united to you and to withdraw my heart from all created things, right? And all created things is a wonderful way of saying things of the sense world, right? Those things that come to you through your senses. To withdraw my heart from all things that came to me through the senses or from all created things, that by Holy Communion and the frequent offering of Mass, I may learn ever to delight in the eternal things of heaven, right? And that's also a poetic way of saying to delight in that which is unchanging, right? That alone which is real, right? So all things that are unchanging, those things are alone are real. Anything that changes is unreal. It's part of the dream. It's part of the projection. Dear Lord, when shall I be completely one with you and entirely forgetful of myself? You in me and I in you. Grant that we may be always so and remain as one forever. Right. So I just gave my book away last week to someone. But there's a wonderful book on the doctrine of non-dualism, non-duality, Christianity. It was titled Christianity and the Doctrine of Non-Duality. And it was a Dominican monk, I think, who wrote the book anonymously. And his position was that non-duality is native to Christianity, which was that's the reason I bought the book, actually, was because I was like, what? Are you kidding me? But indeed it is. You can even see in Jesus in his last prayer on earth was this what he's alluding to here with these words, that I might be completely one with you and entirely forgetful of myself, you in me and I in you. That was his final prayer in Matthew 15, was that through him, that all would find their oneness with God, right? That all would find their oneness with God. You are truly my beloved. Among 10,000 you shall know him. In you my soul delights to dwell all the days of my life. In you, the Lord of peace, is my supreme peace and real rest, and without you is only toil, sorrow, and endless misery. Right? So it's in time we begin to feel that way. Just like when you found your partner for life, at the beginning it was just nice. Oh, I like her. I like him, and then that relationship went on and you were like, wow, I really like you. I really, really enjoy you. Right. And then it went to like, gosh, I can't even stand living apart from you. Let's get a place. Right. Hey, let's make vows for our whole life to be together forever. Right. Let's do this. Right. And so this is really a mirror. That's one of the reasons that marriage is considered sacred in many spiritual traditions, because it is a mirroring of your relationship with the beloved, with the divine. And that's actually the Christian ideal, anyway, of marriage, is that the husband sees God in the wife and the wife sees God in her husband. And that's actually the teaching of Hinduism too, that the husband does not love his wife for the wife's sake, but for the sake of the divine image within his wife. And so we both swear in that relationship, I will live for your good and to make sure your needs are met, and you live for my good and make sure that my needs are met. And we do that as worship to break our ego, right? And to grow closer to the ultimate oneness of divinity. But in our marriage, that is how a marriage stays healthy. The trouble in marriage is that we approach it, in this culture especially, in order to get something from the other person, right? And so if you always look at these dating apps, which I mention them a lot, I've looked at one, so I don't want to give the wrong impression. I looked at one, and it was back in like 2008 when I caught a young fellow in our basement at the monastery going through his his daily checkup on his dating app in there. And I bent over his shoulder and was reading some of the things in there. And I noticed that all the people who are looking for someone, they're looking for what they can get from that person, right? They're telling what I like, what I want, what I'm looking for in a person, what I need from a partner, right? If you approach a relationship listing out what you need from that other person, 6 years, 8 years tops, that relationship's over, right? You always, for a healthy relationship, you have to go into it with, this is what I have to offer. This is what I'm bringing to you, right? And if you can find another person that enters into that relationship with that attitude also, this is what I have to offer you. All right, it's probably going to work out. That's probably going to be okay as long as you can stay dedicated to that idea. And so this is what he's saying here. You are truly my beloved. Among 10,000 you shall know him. And you, my soul, delights to dwell all the days of my life. In you, the Lord of peace, is my supreme peace and my real rest. And without you, everything is only toil and sorrow and endless misery, right? Sounds a little bit melodramatic, but for the soul who has seen God, it's not melodramatic. That's the experience. It's like, you experience something so amazing. Like I remember as a kid, you take that roller coaster ride for the first time, and you can't run from the end of that ride to the beginning of that line fast enough to get back on there again. Like that was the best thing ever, right? Not that God's a roller coaster, but it's that same idea, right? That way that we touch something in there. I mean, I know this happens again and again, and many swamis, many devotees' lives as well. They'll touch something. You know what St. John of the Cross calls it the wound. You know, that Christ kisses you on the neck and leaves a wound there, right? Because as soon as he's gone, you've now got a pain. Not that he caused you pain, but that great deal of love that he just showed to you leaves you unhappy with anything else. You know, and this is why they're talking about this longing of the heart. I want you more than anything, because in your practice, as you grow closer and closer to that divinity within you, right, it becomes the only thing you thirst for. It becomes the only thing you look for, because you realize everything else is dead in comparison to that. You know, nothing else, nothing else. Nothing else can touch you the way that the divine presence can touch you. Truly, you are a hidden God, and you have nothing to do with evil people. Okay. But you speak with the humble and simple of heart, right? It's not so much that God has nothing to do with evil people, because that's absurd. God, first of all, is omnipresent, and omnipresent things can't get away from evil people. Omnipresent things are all around evil people. And so really what happens is that evil people want nothing to do with God. And so that's what it feels like. If you want nothing to do with God, God is respectful and allows you to go your way, but he stays where he is. You're the one who just doesn't look at him. You know, you look to the left, look to the right. I don't know. So truly you are a hidden God, and you have nothing to do with evil people, or evil people have nothing to do with you. But you speak with the humble and the simple of heart, right? He speaks to everyone, but the simple and humble of heart can hear it, right? Those who are simple and humble of heart are locked in their minds. They've got all that noise going on up there. And when the beloved expresses, if you want to call it that, it's always direct. It's always an inspiration from the inside out. It's not a thought of sentences. It's not a string of words. It comes as a knowing for us. How sweet is your spirit, O Lord, who consents to refresh your children with the most delicious bread, which comes down from heaven in order to show them your loving kindness. Right, and that's and that's what the world becomes to us in our mature days and spiritual seekers. The whole world begins to be a method by which God shows us his loving kindness. Right. Now, this doesn't mean you're sitting there and watching something horrific happen and celebrating it as God's kindness, but it might mean that you see it, that you understand the purpose and the necessity of that event, or how that event is helping the people involved in it. But that's a place I reserve for those who are experiencing it. We don't have the right for that. I'm not going to tell somebody in the concentration camp that this is best for you. I'm not going to do it. I'm not even going to posit that, but I'm going to say that, God is always working, right? God is always working. All right. For what other great nation is there that has gods so near to it as you, our God, are to all your faithful ones, to whom you give yourself as food and drink for their daily refreshment and to raise their hearts to heaven. What other people is so fortunate as the Christian people? Well, okay, this is where we're going to run into that one-sidedness because they don't know anybody out who isn't Christian. Because this is not this is the frog in the well, the small puddle folks. Because when you get out and you begin to uh, get to know and commune with people of different faiths and different backgrounds, you find that they're all enjoying God fully and deeply. You go to a Sufi dance and watch them dance in divine joy. You read the poetry of Hafiz and of Rumi, and you're like, my God, these people love God, right? You get into the Buddhist circles, and you see the peace, you see the compassion, you see the stillness of a practitioner, and you're like, these people are really enjoying their spiritual reality. So, what creature under heaven is so beloved as a devout soul into whom God comes in order to feed him with his own glorious body and blood? O grace unspeakable, O marvelous condescension, O love without measure, bestowed only on human beings. All right, we're running into some very particulars of doctrine here. So, which aren't really necessary for all of this, because it's quite as wonderful to know that we are all dream figures within God's creation, within God's dream, and that all of us are composed of God, and that there is nothing but God. And it's a matter of understanding and a matter of realization, right? And so it's unfortunate because what I'm going to say something a little edgy here. Don't be offended by it, especially if you're a Christian listening to a recording of this. But see, what's being demonstrated here is what happens when egoism enters into religion, right? Because the nature of egoism is boundaries. It looks for difference, right? And then it categorizes. That's what egoism does. It looks for difference and categorizes. That's how our whole universe is constructed in the mind, is by looking for differences by things and placing it in its appropriate box, categorized in the mind. And then learning is about drawing lines of relationship between that box and all the other boxes in your mind. Right. And so when egoism enters into religion, that's when we begin to talk like this. Oh, who else could be as happy as this nation is? Who else could be enjoying life as much as we do as this particular religion? Because it's not Christianity that's alone of this. There's even some fundamentalist Vedantins that feel this way. It's the ego's tendency, right? It's you become identified with something, and that something becomes the best, and you become special, which is what the ego's ultimate goal in everything is to make sure that it continues to tell you that you're special, and that you're better, more handsome, wealthier, all of that. And so when we start breaking into religion like that, it would be very uncomfortable to actually talk to a divine being who has an unconditioned love, and to start building yourself up as how lucky and fortunate you are as compared to everybody else. And that being is going to be like, what? I love all those people as well. There's a wonderful story actually in the Bhagavatam about that. When we've mentioned it before, when Krishna is dancing around the fire, playing his flute in the woods, and all the gopi girls are dancing around the flame. And the writer says that every one of the gopi girls felt in their heart that they were Krishna's favorite. Right. And the beautiful thing about that is that everybody can be God's favorite because God is infinite. So he doesn't have to diminish someone else in order to have you as his favorite. Right. And so everybody can be the favorite. But the story goes on because at some point, Krishna picks up Radha and carries her off into the woods. And the scripture says that Radha had the idea, I really am his favorite because he's picked me up and carried me off into the woods. And as soon as she had that thought, she found herself dropped on the ground and couldn't see Krishna anywhere. He literally dumped her right then and there, right? Because that was egoistic thinking. You cannot see God with an ego, right? And so that was what that was indicative of. And so this is a little bit of a warning here. Our religion may be great. Our spiritual practice may be awesome. We will feel special. You will feel deeply loved. And the ego will want to make that unique and for you only. But in reality, this is available to everybody equally, to anybody who wants to approach, and open up and do the work of untying their egoism. They all can have this, regardless of religion, regardless of country, regardless of anything, right? There is nothing I can give to the Lord for this grace, and that is the truth. This is why grace is fundamental to, especially to the path for bhakti, right? That this grace is the quintessential component that brings you to transcendence. It's what allows you to lay down your karma. It's what allows you to get rid of guilt, right? It allows you to get rid of shame. It allows you to set these things down so that you can put your mind on God, right? So that the ego can't sit there and make arguments about why you can't, right? So it's grace that is important. And grace is simply the knowledge of an unconditioned love. And that is what that ultimately is what we begin to sharpen as we enjoy the company of the beloved, of the divine. There is nothing I can give to the Lord for this grace, this supreme love, right? Nothing acceptable I can offer him, but my heart entirely given to God and closely united to him. Then all that is within me will be filled with joy when my soul is perfectly one with God, right? And really what we're seeing there is that all within me will be filled with joy, as it always has been, but you identified with mind and not with your divine spirit, not with yourself, capital S, right? And my soul is perfectly one with God, as it always has been, but you have not known it. You have not realized it, right? You thought you were separate and apart. And so everything worked in that way for you. That's why you suffered. So it wasn't a successful experiment, being separate from God. It was a very painful one. Then he will say to me, if you will be with me, I will be with you. And I will answer him and say, stay with me, Lord, I implore you, for my desire is to be with you. This is my whole desire, that my heart be united with you. All right. So a wonderful calling out and prayer to God. This is all I want. I don't need anything else. Did you see that wonderful, there's a wonderful YouTube video where, as a prank, the parents wrapped up a banana and gave it to their little girl as a Christmas present. So on Christmas Day, she gets a gift and she opens it and it's a banana, and they're just teasing her. But when she opens that gift, her eyes light up and she holds that banana. She's like, a banana. Thank you so much for this banana. And she's running around showing everybody her banana. So the prank totally backfired, right? On the parents. They thought she was going to be like, banana? Who cares? But this just shows that's what love does. Your mother can give you a banana and you'll be thrilled to death. All right. We're on to the next chapter. Anybody want to say anything or point out anything, comment before we jump into a new chapter? All right. Chapter 14, on the ardent desire some devout people have for the body of Christ. All right. Disciple. How great is your goodness, O Lord, which you have stored up for those who fear you, right? And the word fear in there can be also translated as respect. I was taught in seminary some 40 years ago now. When I think of some devout people who approach the Blessed Sacrament with such reverence, with such devotion, often I'm ashamed of myself that I come to your altar so cold and wanting in affection, right? And see what happens there. When our mind goes to other things, that's when we start feeling those weird feelings of shame. When we start looking at someone else and making assumptions about them and comparing ourselves, that's when insecurity happens. That's a function of egoism, right? To go checking over the fence to see how others are doing. And if you find them doing better than you, then you're like, what's going on here? Right? So when I think of some devout people who approach the Blessed Sacrament, devotes the Blessed Sacrament with such reverence and devotion, often I'm ashamed of myself that I come to your altar so cold and wanting in affection. Yeah, if you're thinking about yourself as you approach the altar of the beloved, or as you enter into meditation or sit down for your practice, that's the natural feeling, because we are ego selves at this point. And so there is that feeling of like, oh gosh, I just did that earlier, or oh my gosh, I haven't even finished my glass of wine on the table, and here I am sitting down for meditation. And then you can't feel, assuming that bothers you, but that you can't be at peace in the presence of God because you're thinking about yourself. So what's the solution? You can't just suddenly be perfect and then you can sit down and meditate, right? So what's the solution? Well, the solution is you don't think about yourself when you sit in the presence of God. You think about God. You don't contemplate your own doings and undoings. You contemplate the unconditioned love. You contemplate the infinite wisdom. You contemplate the oneness. You contemplate the fact that there is no room for an ego you in the divine of the universe, that it's all a mistake of thought on your part. That's what you think about when you sit down before the beloved, because that thought of that divine love, that thought of that unconditioned love, as you've sussed it out, as it were, the great British term, you've sussed it out, that gives you your confidence. That's where the spiritual person's confidence comes from. It comes from the presence and love of the divine, not on their attributes, not on their accomplishments, not on what others think about them, right? So it's not in comparison to others. The spiritual self is free because they think of themselves in relationship to God only, right? Others are just God in a different form. I am not on fire in your presence, nor do I feel so drawn to you as do many devout souls who desire so intensely to receive you in communion that the emotion of their heart causes them to weep. And from the depths of their soul, they eagerly long for you, my God, the living fountain. There is no other way their hunger can be satisfied except by receiving your body with joy and spiritual eagerness. Right? Well, that's a beautiful assumption. Of course, you can't know any of that just by looking at another person. You never know. You can never know another person at all. All you can know is what you project on that person, because the only mind you can know is your own. And so you'll project your mind on everybody else. That's why when you realize God, the whole world changes, because that which you project on everyone will change radically. Right? But if you're going to think things about others, you might as well think that everybody is so much more spiritual than you. That's a nice thing. The ardent faith of these people is certainly a living proof of your sacred presence. Truly, they know their Lord in the breaking of bread, for their hearts burn strongly within them when Jesus walks with them. Right? It's actually when they walk with Jesus. We got to keep these things straight here. Right? Breaking of bread, for their hearts burn strongly within them when Jesus walks with them. Such impulse and devotion, such ardent love and strong fervor are too often wanting in me. Right? Okay, that's fine. But again, take lessons from Brother Lawrence. Don't think of your life in terms of potentials of future or happenings of the past. Think of your life as now, because this is the only place you inhabit it. This is the only place that you are alive, in the here and now, right? And so understand this, that you are always in the presence, and you are always in the presence of Christ. You may not be walking with him, but he is never far from you, no matter where you're walking. Oh, good Jesus, so kind and gracious, be merciful to me, your poorest servant, Grant that at least sometimes I may feel a spark of your love stirring in my heart when I receive you in Holy Communion, for the strengthening of my faith, the increase of my hope, and that charity, once enkindled by tasting that heavenly manna, will never fail. Right? And where have we heard those words, never fails, before? In the description of love in 1 Corinthians, right? Love never fails. And God is that love. And so as we receive him in this communion, in this walk, in this life with him, right, we strengthen our faith. How? By thinking of God, by remembering our divine nature, remembering that he has placed, she that has placed that image within us, that it is the seed within us that gives us life, that gives us our intelligence, that gives us our love, that gives us our wisdom. So it's for strengthening my faith, to increase my hope, right? It is because of an unconditioned love that I have any. It's because of the presence of divine intelligence that I can transcend, that I can learn from my mistakes and move closer to the goal in a positive way. And that charity, right? That sweet love becomes ever deeper, ever more pronounced. Once enkindled by tasting that heavenly manna, will never fail. This grace I so desire you will give me in your mercy at the time your will deems best. Beautiful. That is the only extent to which we need to be concerned about it. Right? This grace I so desire you will give me in your mercy at the time that you deem best. Right? So we just sit here doing our practice out of love, out of enjoyment of the divine presence, wanting to build that relationship, but we don't do it for something, right? We do it in the moment as the greatest thing we have, in an appreciation of it in the moment as the best way we could possibly spend this moment. This grace I so desire you will give me in your mercy at the time you will deem best. Then you will visit me with the spirit of fervor, even though I do not burn with such fervor as those special souls so completely devoted to you. Yet I long to have this same fervor, hoping and praying that I may be one of those fervent lovers of yours and be numbered in their holy company. Right? So this is what we're searching for. This is what we're hoping for. And we're going to stop there at the end of chapter 14 for today.